darkening your face, regardless of the context or the circumstances, is always unacceptable because of the racist history of blackface. I should have understood that then, and I never should have done it.
Justin Trudeau apologized again today for his past behavior, but was this enough for Canadians? And what does it all mean for his political future, for the campaign? We've brought everyone in for At Issue tonight. Chantal Hébert is here, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj, and my podcast pal, who I'm now forcing on television, Party Lines co-host Elamine Abdelmahmoud. It happens to everyone eventually. Welcome, yes. Elamine.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm glad you're all here. I'm glad we actually made it work, that we're all in person today, because there's a lot to talk about. Let's start with the second attempt at an apology today. Althea, how do you think the Prime Minister did today?
Pretty good, actually. We haven't seen Justin Trudeau seem like he means that he's sorry on a number of fronts. Like I think about the Aga Khan, for example, the sort of like, I accept the Ethics Commissioner's report with regards to SNC-Lavalin, but I disagree. And here you really did feel like he is truly sorry for what he has done. And even that he's reflected overnight on perhaps what he should have said last night. And that he feels he needs to go further. And it's not just that this is like very politically damaging possibly to him, but this goes to the fiber of who people think he is, and for that he needs to explain.
And is he trying to fight here the notion that his brand has been tainted by racist behavior, or is it more that they think he's hypocritical? Chantal? Or both?
Oh, that's quite a choice getting up in the morning. I think he's trying to salvage his brand, damaged brand as it is, and that is basically where it goes. I agree that the second day apology was better executed than the first day apology, but I think it's not just that he feels it, and I'm not saying I doubt that he feels it, but survival requires it. And their first step in damage control is succeeded in as much as no candidate is left in disgust.
Yes, that's true.
And I think they were worried enough about that they spent a lot of energy on that. Where it goes from here, it's just an impression, but I think on the basis of what I saw today, there's still an audience out there for his apology/explanations.
What do you think, Edward?
I think I agree that hypocrisy and foolishness and fraudulence are the more damaging things to the brand, all of this which speaks to this. He absolutely, at a bare minimum, had to have an absolutely contrite apology, because otherwise the racist thing would stick to him.
Right.
But the contrition that was sufficient, I think, for most people to say, okay, that was a racist thing he did. He was extremely stupid to have ever gone near that. I don't buy the idea that somebody 29 years old in 2001 would not have known that this was off, way off the charts. But I think what is more damaging to him, because it plays into existing perceptions of him, is the idea that he's not what he seems to be, that he's all show and no substance, that he's not particularly truthful. I do think he didn't start very well in that press conference today when he wouldn't answer the question about how many other videos or photos were out there, how many other incidents there had been, but he got a lot better once he, I think, decided he was cornered on that and had to answer that question. And from then on, I think he was much better.
And he also explained, Elamine, that the reason he hadn't told anyone about these pictures, because that was something you and I were talking about on the podcast, was why didn't he tell someone, was because he was embarrassed.
Yes.
Now, I guess we have to take him at his word that that's what was motivating him. But what did you make of the way he approached it today versus even last night?
It's like the least of my expectations that you would be embarrassed about something like this. Of course you'd be embarrassed.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you've built a brand around being this person who wants to have those conversations about race, wants to have those conversations about all these issues that everyone else keeps running away from, built a brand, frankly, around being a little bit sanctimonious. I mean, like, it's okay to be sanctimonious because being a moral leader is good. You can't then come around and have this thing kind of be hiding in the background and have it pop up like this. He had an opportunity to address it when he became leader of the party, when he became prime minister. The 4 years that he was prime minister, it's just puzzling to me that he didn't address any of those things yesterday or today.
Well, that he just hoped it would never come out, too.
Two journalists have just published books about Justin Trudeau. One of them, your colleague, Aaron Wherry, had lengthy conversations with Justin Trudeau. He could have addressed this issue as part of those conversations and had some control over his message, and that didn't happen. I also think that Justin Trudeau had to know over the past decade that what he had done would get a candidate disqualified for running for a mainstream party, not just the Liberals in this country, that he might not have become Liberal leader with those images. And I suspect that if he is saved from defeat on that basis this time, it's because he has a record as a prime minister, that if this had happened in 2015, he probably would have hit a wall.
Can I play one more clip that struck me? And it was when he talked about his own privilege, because I think that also plays into damaging of the brand or trying to salvage it. He said that word, my producer Ariel counted 9 times. Here's one of those instances.
I have always acknowledged that I come from a place of privilege, but I now need to acknowledge that that comes with a massive blind spot. Wanting to do good and wanting to do better simply isn't good enough, and you need to take responsibility for mistakes that hurt people who thought I was an ally.
What did you make of that? He talked about layers of privilege and
Oh, he mentioned intersectionalities and microaggressions.
yes.
It plays well with a certain constituency. It sounds like he's being contrite. It sounds like he's making a searching self-examination, and in some ways perhaps he is, but it also gets him off the hook. It's not his own personal failings. It's not his own personal desire to show off or his incuriousness that he never actually figured this out, even at the age of whatever he was, 30 years old. It's just his privilege. He can't be blamed because he comes from a place of privilege. It's an interesting tack. I'm sure they thought it out beforehand. That way it looks like you're addressing it, looks like, and it looks like you're broadening the discussion out, but in a way you're moving it off the focus on your own personal failings.
But it's so interesting because privilege has been one of the things that he's had to sort of push back against, the notion that he's talked about
Financial
it.
privilege.
Yes, yeah.
In terms of education, in terms of opportunities, but this is about almost like white male privilege and a generational privilege, right? But I agree with Andrew. It takes the conversation away from your personal judgment to where it's a wider discussion that society can have, because a lot of people in society feel like that discussion should be had. And a lot of younger people, frankly, millennials, who he needs to go out and vote for him again, or at least not vote Conservative, not vote NDP. And, they look at this and they think, whoa, who are you? Like, you are not, the Liberals want to make a big deal about Andrew Scheer and LGBTQ rights and anti-abortion comments because millennials will look at that and say, whoa, you don't speak for my generation. Yeah. Well, dressed in blackface, you certainly don't speak for my generation. You're not acting like someone we thought we knew, and that is really damaging.
So is there a space then where those people can be wooed back or comforted or reassured that this was in the past? And
I mean, look, saying the right words, saying, structural racism and intersectionality and privilege suggests that you know the right words. I think that gets you in the conversation. But I think it's a major failing of us, the media, that we don't ask him what he means when he says those words. Because I'm actually not, at this point, I'm not 100% sure he knows what those words mean. If he knew, then I think he would have talked about this a long time ago. But saying those words as signals to certain, voting segments that he wants to communicate to them that he understands their values, that's useful. I think he needs to be a little bit pushed on whether he understands
he
what
knows,
privilege.
though. I mean,
Listen, I don't know that anymore after this episode. I really don't.
Well, I suspect he's going to have opportunities, and I don't mean the leaders' debate with 5 other leaders, if he wants to address it further. I think for now, most voters are going to be thinking long and hard about the explanations that they heard. It's not a small day or a small thing when the photo of your prime minister is the most watched picture around the world.
Yeah.
Something happened here. This isn't just a campaign hiccup and we go on in 3 days when the news cycle has done it. We talked about this brand. It's not about restoring the brand, it's managing to go forward with it. But this is not going to go away, even with a victory on the 21st of October.
He has to live with it now.
And if nothing else, it's going to put a severe crimp in the Liberal strategy of attacking their opponents for all their failings. It is particularly galling that they've been doing that over the last several weeks, even as he himself would have known that this was waiting in the background somewhere.
Okay, I'm going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how Justin Trudeau's opponents have responded and whether there's opportunity there. More at issue after that.
How do you respond to somebody? How do you look someone in the eye that's mocked the lived reality that I've lived, but more importantly, that so many Canadians have lived. People who have faced injury, both in physical violence and in words, people who haven't been able to get jobs because of the color of their skin, now are waking up to seeing the Prime Minister of this country mock their lived realities.
I believe that Canadians might have been able to accept his apology if he had been truthful and open, if he hadn't based that apology on a lie. So once again, we see with Justin Trudeau one set of rules for himself and one set of rules for the rest of us.
Welcome back to At Issue. Chantal, Andrew, Althea, and Elamine all with me tonight. Let's start with, I want to go through a little bit of the reaction, who handled it the best, and whether, how you manage something like this, because you have to use it politically, but realize that there are people too that have been affected by this in a different way. Go ahead, Andrew.
I thought Jagmeet Singh was flawless, and flawless not just in a politically calculating way, but because, and whether there was political calculation involved, I'm sure there was, but he took it to a higher plane. It was looking at some of the moral questions, looking at the reverberations for young children who were looking at this and would be understandably mortified and dismayed by the whole thing and hurt. I thought Andrew Scheer consistently misses the opportunity to take the same sense of gravitas. It doesn't mean you can't, compare and contrast with your opponent, but it just putting the knife in that kind of very overt way, on an issue like this, it didn't look as good. Well,
you expect, I think, a moment of leadership, and it could come from Trudeau as well. He probably tried to do that today again, but it could come from any of them, that you sort of rise above things and talk about it in a different way.
And that's what Jagmeet Singh, I think, delivered. He delivered that moment of saying, okay, this is not really about the circus. We're obsessed with the circus, but there are real people who have to look at those images and they have reactions to those, and they're reactions of hurt and pain because of the history of blackface and brownface. And so he's going to address them first. And I think his speech last night was very moving and very personal, and really didn't come across as some kind of political calculus as much as it was just here's my personal reflection as someone who's lived this reality.
Chantal?
One comment I picked up here or there, which I thought was interesting, and from people who are from visible minorities, and one of them said, the last thing we need are two white politicians having a bidding war over who's the least racist. And I think if I were Andrew Scheer, I would consider that statement very carefully, because that leadership moment he did not provide, and it's getting a bit too late now.
I think Jagmeet Singh, basically, it's his moment to shine. And I would say his first response was the one I was most impressed with, because he was in the middle of a town hall. He had no idea what the reporter was asking him. And his initial response was just, I felt like, really perfect, in fact. Like, this is how emotionally I feel about what you're telling me. I'm shocked, I'm surprised, I'm disgusted. Also, these are the questions I ask myself, which is, a political response about, is the Prime Minister somebody different in public than he is in private? The second time he spoke to reporters, I think was calculating, but that doesn't mean it wasn't authentic, because you really did feel like what the message he wanted to send to young people who felt racist, who have experienced racism, himself included. You could see it in his face. He was tearing up. It was very emotional. But that, I think, was more calculating. So to me, the first response was really like, when you're talking about a moment where a leader shines, he shined.
But just to embroider on that, just because it was calculated doesn't make it wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we talk about the art of being politic, this is politics in some ways at its best, is when you're able to say and do the right thing at the right moment that isn't just a cheap pander, but actually expresses what people's feelings are. And if you make some political gain out of it, well, you've earned it.
But you can cheapen that moment if you keep on trying to repeat it.
Yes.
That's true.
Can the Liberals move past this? Is it too soon for us to conclude how?
It's too soon.
Yeah.
I think people, if people worried about voters not engaged, I think
that's done.
They are now.
we've resolved that problem, but I think it's going to simmer, and voters are going to be.
But it's definitely going to remind people of all of the doubts about Justin Trudeau. Maybe that's all priced in. Maybe the people who are already going to be moved by that have already made their minds up, but maybe not.
Or maybe they just don't show up and vote.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Glad to see you all in person. Before we go, be sure to subscribe to At Issue, the podcast. Look for it on iTunes, any major podcast app, on our website, cbcnews.ca/thenational. And this is how I got Elamine to be here. I promised to plug Party Lines, our new podcast that we co-host. New episodes out every Thursday, so one dropped just today.